Hi, I'm Lee, and today I would like to talk about money. Money is seen as one of the last true taboos of the world, or at least Western society. I know in the UK, people don't like talking about how much money they have, how much money they don't have, their income, what they own, so forth. There's even been news articles saying people feel more comfortable talking about their sex lives than they do about money, which seems weird because money impacts everyone. People have it, don't have it, want more of it, don't know what to do with it, spending too much of it, so forth. But there's so much that goes on with it, yet people don't, because they don't like talking about it. There's things they either don't understand or misunderstand, that they're afraid to try, so forth. So I want to try and talk about it to try and demystify it in certain ways. So, big thing for me with money is how people save it. And more importantly, how there's a difference between saving and investing. So, most people, when they have money, they will keep it in the bank. It might earn a certain amount of interest. You don't really notice it, it's just there to be accessible. But if you're planning for the long term, so it could be when you hit retirement, and it could be when you're 50, 60 plus, it could be to buy a house, it could be to pay for a wedding, like a once in a lifetime holiday, things that are not within like a year or two, but down the road. Saving, weirdly, isn't necessarily a good idea, because the problem with saving is generally you keep it cash, you keep it in your bank. And most bank accounts, although currently with how the interest rate is going, not so much, you earn interest on it. So the idea behind interest is you go, dear bank or building society, here is my money, look after it for me. You can use it to make money. I want a bit of it. And they give you some interest. So they might pay you 1% interest on your savings. So every year, if you have £100 with them, they go, thanks for letting us look after your money, have £1. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you have £1,000, it becomes a tenner. If you have £10,000, then you're doing quite well, and so forth. But the issue is, generally, if you want to borrow money from these things, the interest rate is much, much higher. So with a mortgage, currently, it might be, say, 2%, but when you're borrowing over many, many years, the interest builds up. If you get overdrawn on your account, it could be 40% interest. And last thing you want to do is owe £100. And if you keep owing the £100 over a year, also need to pay them an extra £40. Well, at the same time, they're only giving you like £1 interest. But by people not understanding interest and so forth, it means that they can get into debt they don't understand and so forth. With investing, no, sorry. All right, let's go back on. Keep on savings. Part of the issue with savings and the interest rate that banks offer is very, very often the amount they will give you is less than inflation. So inflation is generally how much things gradually increase in value. Overall inflation, so long as it's steady, is good. People earn more money, so things balance out by becoming more expensive. This is why years ago people could buy a really nice house for £50,000. You remember when a little Freddo chocolate was 10p and much bigger than they are now, and so forth. Things cost more money because as people earn more, they can spend it, which can raise prices, raise rent, mortgages, so forth. If the interest is going faster than your savings, then say inflation was going up 2%. So if it cost you £100 to buy some shopping this year, if there was 2% interest, 2% inflation, then to buy the same amount of shopping, you would need £102. And then it keeps scaling on by 2% every time. So it would be £104 and some pennies, and it goes up and up and up. But if you're the interest on your account has less than inflation, your money, in terms of what you can buy with it, is actually shrinking. The amount of money you have is still going up. So you go £100, £101, £102 and a little bit, and so forth. So whilst your money is going up, it's not going up as fast as things cost. So how do you deal with that? So what you do instead is you invest. As soon as you suggest investing to people, either their eyes glaze over or they consider it gambling. They think you're just going to put your money in the stock market and it's going to disappear. But it will only disappear if you make bad decisions with it. But hopefully I can give you ways of how you could do it best. What most people, if you're in a job that pays enough, and I think it's something like £12,000, and if you're over 21, then by default in the UK, you get opted into an employer-based, work-based pension scheme. So these days, most pensions are what's known as defined contribution. You pay money in, and then at the end of it, your money grows and you get it out. There are occasionally some which are known as defined benefit. So these are things like military, NHS, I think teachers either used to be, so forth. So it would be, they will take a cut of your money, and then when you retire, you will get a certain percentage based on what you earned until you die. So it's not necessarily based in, you put in £50,000 over your life, here is the pot. It is, when you're earning, you're paying for the people who've already retired, and when you're retired, the people who are earning are helping support you. There are not as many of those around, and they don't necessarily apply to what I'm about to talk about. So I'm going to talk about defined contributions. If you have a workplace pension, it's very likely yours is defined contribution. So with this, you are already investing. You might not realize it, but you're investing. But you could probably manage it better. So what happens when you invest is you could buy a piece of a company, very small piece. And then when the company does well because they build new offices, new manufacturing, they launch a new product, they make lots of money, the company is worth more. So your tiny piece, you still own the same piece, but that little bit is worth a little bit more, and then over time gets more and more and more. You could buy one company and it's like betting on a particular number at the roulette table when you're gambling, if you're over in Vegas or a casino or something. You're hoping that company does well, and it could do really well. So you could look at things like your Microsofts, your Apples, and you could go, yeah, they're really good, they're very expensive. Part of the reason they're expensive is they've already done well. The companies which are similar and fell down, their number didn't come up and people lost all their money. So how can you mitigate that? You could buy lots of different companies. But then how do you know what companies to buy? Do you be like, I've heard of these companies, I want them, or I want to invest in green companies, or I want to invest in oil, I don't care about the ethics, I know they make money, and tobacco, arms, whatever. But you're still having to pick which ones they are, and it can get very fiddly. And you might not know, well, how do I know if this company is doing well? Where do I look? What you could do instead is you can look at a thing called a fund. And they take the hassle for you. So you'd be like, Lee, I want to invest in the top 100 companies in the UK. How do I do it? Well, there is a thing for it. So with a fund, they can be themes on all sorts of things. There are more funds than you can possibly think of. But what they will do is they will bundle all these companies together for you. So rather than saying, I want a bit of that company, I want a bit of that company, you go, this is the top 100 companies in the UK. This is the top 250 companies in North America. These are the top 1,000 companies in the world. I want to just bundle them all together. With a fund, your money is diversified. So if a company is not doing well, they're a piece of the much bigger picture. And you would need all of the companies or a majority of companies to do poorly for your fund to do badly. If all of them stay stable and just a few of them do well, then the fund starts to go up and so forth. So it spreads the risk between a number of companies, but also generally what those companies are about. So unless you want it themed in a particular way, so like you went, I only want green companies, odds are you go, well, I want a mix of companies. So there might be technology, there might be banking, there might be construction, there might be industrial, all sorts of things. If one sector does poorly, so at the moment, aeronautical is not doing very well. But if aeronautical is only a piece of your much bigger fund, the rest of the fund is supporting it. You go, this bit's not doing well, but the rest of it, we're doing fine. But what's funds got to do with pensions, and why are pensions good, and so forth? So with a fund, you could have a fund in a pension. You could have a fund in a stocks and shares ISA. You could have a fund and just on its own and not under any particular kind of thing. Things like ISAs and pensions and so forth, they're sort of loosely connected to a fund. Main way to think of it is, think of a fund like a loaf of bread. A pension, ISA, so forth, they're just a bag you put your fund in. So if you went, I want the top 100 companies in the UK, that would be known as the FTSE 100. And it doesn't matter if you want to buy it for you, if you want your pension to be focused on it, whatever. The FTSE 100 is still the FTSE 100. It's still this loaf of bread in my hand. But the different ways you want to invest that money can alter. So with a pension, they're designed that you can't access the money until you're currently 55. Soon it's going to be hitting 57, and who knows what that's then by. I don't know at what age I'm going to be able to access my pension. It might be 60 by the time I get to it. I don't know. So the idea is you pay some of your money every month and you buy some of these funds, but also your employer does the same. And I know some people who go, well, there's no point me buying into a pension. I might be dead by then, or I can't afford to buy into my pension. I want to buy a house. This is money that I could use now. The problem is if you're doing like the absolute minimum between you and your company, you put in 8% between you. And there's government minimum. So it's like you pay 3%, the company plus the government pays 5%. So you're getting free money. You can't access it till you're old. But if I said to you, right, if you give me a tenner, I'll also put a tenner with it, but you can't access it for 20, 30 years. But in the meantime, that money's going to grow. You could be short-sighted and go, I want that tenner now. Or you could think, where else can I double my money? And then let it get bigger as time goes on. If you're ignoring your pension, you're giving up free money. And anyone who wants money surely wants free money. So I'm going to try and describe how a pension works and then talk about how an ISA works, because they do similar things. And I love drawing stuff. So we've got our funds. Now the key thing I'm going to do with both is these could be the same funds. Your funds don't matter in return to a pension. They're on like this fund will only exist in a pension or only in an ISA or so forth. You might have different providers who offer specific things, but overall the principle applies. Now your pension is this magical bubble. Now in the UK, and I can only talk about how UK pensions work. For other countries, I would look it up. I'm generally curious how other countries work. I know, it gets messy. So in the UK, when you pay in, the government goes, how much tax would you have had to pay to get that? We'll give it back to you. And they give you the tax back. So for a basic rate taxpayer, you would pay 20% income tax. So what the government does is they go, well, if you say you earn £100, they tax £20 off you, so you end up with £80. If you put £80 into your pension, the government goes, "Ooh, we like you putting money into pensions. We'll give you that £20 back." So you now have £100 set up here. But the condition is, when it comes out this end, they then tax you on the way out. So it could seem a case of, well, what's the point of getting the money back here and they'll reclaim it here? Now, there are certain, not necessarily tricks, but benefits. If you are a higher rate taxpayer, you would pay 40% tax. And some people think you've earned a lot of money, you deserve to pay a lot of tax. Other people go, why should I work hard just to have it all taxed away? Conversation for another day. But by paying, you would have 40% of your money taken away. So if you put £60 in, the government goes, we took 40 quid from you to get that 60 quid. We'll give it back to you and we'll put it here. You are less likely to be a higher rate taxpayer when you come to retirement. So you might only get taxed 20%, or if it's like it is now, you get a personal allowance of how much money you could earn per year and not pay tax. Currently, that's £12,500. So if you took £12,500 from your pension, you wouldn't pay any tax. So you are actually profiting. And this is before you're even getting your free money from your employer who's doing the exact same thing. So you could be going, well, I'm going to put £80 in. The government goes, we owe you 20 quid. Here's £100. Your employer could go, we're also going to give you £100. So you're spending 80 quid. And then in here, you're getting £200. And then you might get taxed at the end. You might get taxed 20%. Say you got 20% in, 20% out. If your £200 gets taxed, you get £160. You only put 80 in, you've still doubled your money. You're still getting free money through this process, and this is before it grows. Now, you might go, well, I want to save for the future, but I want the money before retirement age. You might want it for a big holiday or a house 5-10 years down the line. I wouldn't recommend investing in the short term because, as the recent economy showed us, stocks and shares can go wobbly, but in the long term they go up. Is capitalism encouraging companies to go up in value? So with an ISA, you're likely to have had your money taxed on the way out. So when you put the money in, you don't get the rebate like the pension. So if you put £80 in, you only get the £80 in here. Your employer doesn't help you, nothing like that. But as your money grows, when you come to take it out, you don't pay any tax on it. So if you have a load of money in here because you keep topping up, and then you go, oh, I would now like to cash out to help buy my house, go on a round the world trip, send my child to university, or support me when I retire in my pension, because you can do both. You could have £100,000 in here, which is an astronomical amount of money to me. I do not have £100,000 in ISA. I am not anywhere near that. I think I'm not even on 5,000. But you would pay no tax on this. Whereas remember, you get tax based on how much income you draw. So if you were taking out more than £12,500, they would tax it. You could go, I want all £100,000 from here, and you pay no tax. I've seen stuff online that talks about, in the UK, we have some of the most complicated tax systems in the world, but we also have some of the most generous tax systems in the world if you know what to do with it. So this is how you can make your money with your funds. But the reason why you would want to use a fund, whether because you have to because you're paying into a pension and you don't realize it, or you might choose to with a stocks and shares ISA, is they generally outperform savings interest by massive percentages. For example, so I have a stocks and shares ISA. I pay into a fund, and in my fund, it covers over like 6,000 top companies around the world across all different industries, locations. Big percentage it pays to North America, but that's because North America is the leading company which holds all these countries. It's like 60% of the world's economy. You may think it's madness, but that's just the way it is. And even after the massive crash that happened in March, I think I'm like about 4% overall since I've started paying in, and that's with the massive dip wiping out like a month's worth of progress. So I pay in £100 a month, and I'm here to be open and talk about money. Pay in £100 a month, and in March, the value of my savings went down by over £100. So it was like I forgot to pay in 1 month, and it was like 4,000 something, and it went down. Like there's this massive spike on a graph, and I was like, that's a bad month. But by keeping your money in there, the companies will still recover. They will grow. Capitalist countries and companies and just capitalists in general, they want to grow. If I invested £1,000 in a company, the worst that could happen is I could lose £1,000. The company could go bust and crash. But there's no upper limit. There's no glass ceiling saying a company cannot earn more than this. If I bought £1,000 in a company, there's nothing that says I can't be worth more than £2,000 and then stop. Not allowed to. So whilst there is a hard bottom, there is no cap on what your money can be. And if you're getting, say, 5% a year in your investments, then not only are you beating inflation, so your money becomes more valuable, but it helps stimulate the economy. It does all sorts of bits and pieces that people don't care about. Ultimately, you want your money to be stronger, not weaker. Now, I'm not saying don't keep any cash, because bad things happen. And there's a lot of stuff I read online, books, podcasts that recommends having things like an emergency fund. If something were to go horribly, horribly wrong, say a boiler burst, car broke down, whatever, you want to have some money available to do it. Now, the purpose of that money isn't to grow. The purpose of that money is to be available. So if it's earning interest, fantastic, because at least you're trying to fight against inflation, but you also don't necessarily need a lot of it. So some things talk about make sure you have 1 month's outgoings, and what's important is about your outgoings, not your income. So if you spend £1,000 a month to pay for rent, food, bills, or whatever, then if you've got £1,000 in that squirreled away and not under your beds or anything like that, because your house insurance probably won't cover it, then if something were bad to happen, you got that money. You're not having to go into debt to do it, because otherwise you're paying like 40% interest to them. You're giving them your hard-earned money. No one wants that. Then over time, seeing things recommend looking at going up to like 3 to 6 months. And you can go, well, okay, Lee, I'm going to have this stash of money. Where do I keep it? If I'm only getting 1% in a bank, what's the point? If I've got, so as I say, if we say it's £1,000 a month outgoings, if I have £3,000 in the bank, if I'm getting 1%, then over the year I will earn a mighty 30 quid. What's the point of keeping it in the bank? And it can be difficult, but as I said, it's not there to make money. But there are things you can do to try and balance the odds in your favor. So one place I use to help keep some funds, so there's a couple of things I do. So I try and keep a certain reserve in my current account, just because if I want to do a random big spend because there's a birthday or something coming up, it's just on hand. And you might choose to have a credit card to go with it. Credit cards are good if you use them correctly. Topic for another time. But I have an account called Marcus, and they're currently closed to new members because the problem is they were so good, too many people used it. And I think they're paying like 1.15, 1.05. It's steadily gone down. So they're paying interest every month, and over the year it works out about like 1.1% or something like that. So depending on what inflation is, I'm still losing, but I'm losing as little as possible. What I also do is a thing called premium bonds. Now, if you do the lottery, personally, I think you're throwing your money away because stats tell you how bad it is. What if I told you as the way that you could do something that was the equivalent of the lottery? 2 people per month win £1 million tax-free, and then other people earn smaller amounts like £500,000 to 1,000 down to 25 quid. But if you didn't win, rather than like the news agent taking the money to buy the lottery ticket, you keep the money. That's what a premium bond is. So it's like buying a lottery ticket but keeping the cost of the ticket. So you don't earn inflation in these accounts. Effectively, your winnings is your inflation. So if you had a decent amount of money in there and you won £25 every so often, that would be similar to if you had a normal cash account and were paying interest. But because of the lottery aspect to it, if you were hoping one day to win big, I mean, the odds are horribly, horribly against you of it ever happening, but it does happen every month to 2 people. So there are restrictions on premium bonds. You can buy them for children. So you could buy it as a gift for your kids, grandkids, whatever. The parents or legal guardians need to set up the account. So if a grandparent wanted to buy it for my son, I would have to set up his account first and then they could buy them for them. You need to buy a minimum of £25 worth at once. And you can only have a maximum of £30,000 in there, which again, for some people, even for me, £30,000 is a massive amount of money. I put in, I think it's now £100 a month into them. You've got to have had your money in there for an entire month before it gets entered into this lottery. So if I bought it in the middle of July, so if I bought it today, because it wasn't in there from the beginning of the month, they wouldn't be counted for all of August, but in September is when the money, they would enter the draw. Every £1 worth of bonds is effectively is one draw in it. But when there's millions of people doing it, potentially up from 25 to 30,000 goes each, you can see what the odds of it aren't good. But there are calculators online that work it out, and it's like 1.14 or 1.2 something percent. So it's just still generally beating most accounts now. And the thing is, if you then do need that money, you can withdraw your money. It takes a couple of days, apparently. I haven't needed to do it yet, so I don't know personally, but from everything I've read, it can take a couple of days. So that's why I've got some of the stuff in one. That's why I've got the multiple options I do. So current account for instant access. I've got a Marcus account. I can get it within like an hour, I think probably within minutes, and it's there, but it earns a little bit more than my current account. And then I've got the premium bonds getting me the biggest rewards, but accessible. But my true long-term money gaining is in my stocks and shares ISA. So I feel like I've covered all sorts of things, and I didn't have the greatest plan other than like pre-drawing this. But ultimately, if money can be hard to talk about, because if you're in debt, if you're struggling, it can be very hard to say, I'm not doing well. There are charities and organizations out there to help you. So I've heard of Stepwise mentioned countless times online with people. They can help you with stuff. Conversely, if you have money, you're doing well, it can seem like you're bragging. And I've got some friends who are better off than me, and I've got some friends who are worse off than me. And I feel like if I were to talk about it, then is there the risk of the people who are worse than me, like, well, he's just showing off, he's got this money, he's doing all this stuff. But there also might be the other people I know who like, well, my house is worth £500,000 and I drive around in this blah, 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 blah. That's nothing compared to what I've got. But there are people who could be making like decent sums of money, people who could be on like £50,000 a year. But if they're then spending all of their money every month, because they've got a massive house, they've got a massive mortgage to pay for, if they've got lots of school fees, a big car, they keep going on fancy holidays. You're living in the now and you're not preparing for your long term. Because ultimately, you'd be a case of, if you want your money to work for you, you've got to work with it. You've got to treat it with respect. You've got to work with it properly. So you need to be investing in your future. And as well as just physically investing your money, it's investing in yourself, your understanding. If you don't know what your pension fund is, that's something you can invest in yourself. You can go, what fund am I? I've got a pension at work. I pay into a fund. I don't know what fund it is. I don't know how much they charge me for it. They will be charging you. They will be taking a little bit of money every month, quarter, year, depends what it is, because they're having to look after it. So they have to get paid. But if you don't know how much they're charging you, you could be paying, like, even if it's say 1%, you go, well, that's not much. But if your money only grew by 1% that year because it wasn't doing very well, they've just stolen all of your growth. If meanwhile your pension only charges 0.5%, then in the long term, that amount balloons up. If you don't know where in the world you're investing, the type of companies you're investing in, you might be investing in things that you don't agree with, or you might go, I'm investing in too much in one place. So the default pension at my workplace, 50% of it is in the UK, 50% of it is the world. That's terrible. And the reason being, the UK does not represent 50% of the world's economy. About 5 to 7 or so. So if the UK does well, you will feel it because your wages will increase. The things you can buy may become cheaper, more available, so forth. But if the UK does poorly, then you will feel it before your pension even feels it, because you might go, well, my shopping is now expensive. The petrol I put on my car is more expensive. My rent's gone up. Mortgage is more expensive. And then to think, if your pension is not growing at the same rate, it's over-focused in one place. If you go, well, Lee, I want to save, but I've got credit card debt, I've got personal loans, should I invest? No. Because if you're growing, say your stocks and shares ISA grows 10% a year, cracking amount, but you're paying off debt which is 20, 30, 40%, then that's eating into your growth. You need to think clear about as much debt as possible. Pretty much, there's only really like two considered good debts, as it were. One's the mortgage, generally because the rates on those are quite low. Mine's 2-point-something%, but only because I'm fixed in for another year, so I can't really change it to make the most of this massive Bank of England crash. And the other one is student loans, because these days it's a percentage of how much you earn over a threshold, and apart from particular circumstances, there's not an incentive to pay it out early. Some consider it a graduate tax, and there's a whole discussion online about whether it should be seen as that or not, and beyond the point of that. But generally, those debts you don't have to be in a rush to deal with. I mean, my mortgage is like £150,000 and I've got 27 years on it. That's a long, long haul. But if you've got a credit card and you're having to pay 40% per year, if you go, Lee, I can put £100 into an ISA per year. Should I do it? Have you got credit cards? Yeah. Clear them down first, because they're slowing down the progress you could make each time. Because once you clear down that credit card, you go, wow, I've actually got this money available I wasn't having before. Now I can invest it in things to grow. I can build up my reserves so I don't have to get into that kind of debt spiral again. Credit cards, if used correctly, are great. There's special rules within all sorts. And potentially you might see a credit card as a way to have your emergency fund. So long as you pay it off in full immediately. It's very Martin Lewis, and yeah, but credit cards aren't evil, but getting into uncontrolled debt is bad. Fortunately, I've never been in that situation, and hopefully I never will be, but people close to me have, and it can be very, very difficult to talk about. And I've been able to get them to open up to me and talk about it and try and help them solve it. And no one wants to be in that situation, but hopefully with this, you can try and prevent it. You can make your money work for you. So think about investing your money, where you want to invest it, how you want to invest it. If it's far, far down the road, make the most of your workplace pension. If your workplace offers additional matching, find out if they do and how easy it is to do it. It's probably known as AVC, Additional Voluntary Contribution. At my workplace, by default, you pay 5%, my work pays 5%. But they will match up to 10%. So if you pay 10%, you're hurting yourself a little bit more now, but you're getting that extra money on top into your pension. So if your default was £100 per month, and you could choose to put in an extra £100 to get £200 per month, you're now going from £100 to £200. So you're paying £200 and you're getting £200 free every month. And again, who doesn't want free money? You go, I can't access it till I'm like mid-50s. Well, if you could access it from 55, but you're intending to live to be 85, not an unrealistic amount these days. That's 30 years of money you need squirreled away. You don't want to be working when you're 60, 70, 80. You need a good, healthy pot of money to do that. So look into your workplace pensions if you can. If you are a sole trader or contractor, there's a thing called a SIP, self-invested pension plan. Works in a similar way. You still get the tax relief depending on how you do it. If you're doing it through a limited company, your company you pay in, but that's very complicated stuff, and that's where an accountant is worth the money. But again, don't shortchange yourself, because you're still missing out on that free government money. For companies, I believe you could use it to help lower your corporation tax bill instead. So rather than getting the tax rebate on the money you earn, the company pays it and you pay less corporation tax. And I don't have a limited company, so I don't know, about something I've read. Excuse me. So talk about money if you need help with it. If you're not sure what to do with something, ask people. If your friends don't know, then it could be a good learning experience for all of them as well. They might know stuff and they just don't feel comfortable talking about it because they're worried how they might be perceived. I've tried speaking with people I know online and at work to go, do you understand how pensions work? Do you understand AVC? Do all this? Do you realise you're ignoring free money? And loads of them are like, I didn't know this a thing, or explain to me how these funds work. I've talked about the charges, how they're spread, how the growth is done. I showed them what I'm doing, and they're like, why has no one told us this? The problem is, arguably it's hereditary. Because money isn't really talked about at schools, people have to learn about it the hard way. If your parents don't talk about investing in the stock market, in bonds, in trusts and all this kind of things, then they can't talk to you about it. You can't see in action. So then you can't talk to your kids about it, and it continues and it continues and it continues. If you go, well, the only way we buy things on credit card and we pay them in them off and try and deal with it that way, then kids are likely to emulate it, and that doesn't do anyone any good. But if someone went, right, I've got £1,000, I don't need it right now, I want to do something with it for later on, what do I do? Growing up, people gone, just stick it in the bank. Because that's what they did. Because that's what everyone did. But just because everyone does it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's best. It's from a place of ignorance, not a place of malice. They're not doing it because they want your money to not grow as well as it should. But they might not know there's other options, there's better options. and you can do it all online. My ISA, my pension, they're all manageable through this magic box that is the internet. There's so much stuff out there in the UK, and again, this is all really UK biased. There is a cracking book called Tim Housemeyer Investing. There's no affiliate link, none of this stuff. It is just a useful book. I found about this through a subreddit called UK Personal Finance. Very much does what it says on the tin. And there's so many people who go, I've just got this money because of an inheritance or something like that. What should I do? Or I'm trying to deal with debt. What do I do? And so forth. And it's a really helpful place. I've learned so much from there, and it's got me to think about things. And I've tried to digest it in, I'm now ticking on over 40 minutes of rambling about money, that I'm hoping that if you manage to get to the end, thank you very much. But hopefully it will get you thinking about your pension, your investing, what to do with your long-term money, how to save it, to look at doing more than just a saving account or a current account or so forth. If you've got money that you want to not use for more than 5 years, look at investing in the market, but look at a diversified fund, because they're just really useful. So that's my 40 plus minute rambling of money. Don't let it be a taboo subject. Talk about things. If you want to know how much I earn, ask me. If you want to know what should I do with stuff, ask me. I will talk about it, because by talking about it, you can find out if you're underpaid compared to others in your same role, if you're not sure what to do with things, if you suddenly inherited money and didn't know what to do with it, things you can do with it. Last thing you want to do is flitter away something that's been gifted to you and then regret it later on because you did foolish things with it. So, hoping this money talk has encouraged you to open up, and any questions, get in touch. Thank you very much.